and Dr. Edward Kung of Cal State Northridge. Following the adoption of the city's LA housing element, establishing a goal to produce nearly 61,000 units a year between 21 and 29, the LABC Institute has sought to help provide recommendations to make that possible. Recommendations that would streamline its current approval processes and vastly improve the production of the number of units we need in LA, particularly units that are affordable to middle and low income Angelenos. Through months of analysis of public data sets and survey instruments, our researchers identified some of the key bottlenecks in the development process that led to an average project completion time of nearly 4 years, and laid out recommendations that would accelerate our production of affordable middle income and mixed income housing. With a strong mayor in office, she has prioritized streamlining efforts through her executive orders. The report recommends building off of these policies to increase production while creating certainty in the development process. We will be discussing how these recommendations could be implemented today. We'd also like to extend an invitation to you to join us a week from Friday, May 19th, at our annual Mayoral Housing Summit at UCLA. You can find the registration for that on our website at labusinesscouncil.org. We want to thank our partners who funded the research and who have been leading on efforts to reduce homelessness in our region. They include the Weingart Foundation, the Conrad Hilton Foundation, the California Endowment, the California Community Foundation, and Enterprise Community Partners. We also want to thank our LABC Institute Working Group members, which included over 60 nonprofit, for-profit, city officials, financiers, labor, and construction firms who helped provide critical expertise and data that went into producing the key findings of the report. To read the report, please go to the labusinesscouncil.org website. Before handing it over to LA Council President Paul Kerkorian, it is my pleasure to introduce a short video featuring our researchers, Dr. Stuart Gabriel and Dr. Edward Kong, among some of our key partners. The video will provide information about the report and our key findings. And with that, please roll the video.
Los Angeles has long failed to keep pace with the housing demands of a growing population. Due to the shortage of housing, rising costs have led to an affordability crisis.
LA is one of the most expensive cities in the United States to live. Over half of the renters are cost burdened.
We have an egregious housing situation here in LA that is very significantly related to the economic viability of the city. It's related to businesses who don't come to LA. It's related to departure of workers.
Why do all of our firemen, why do all of our policemen not live in Los Angeles? They have to live somewhere else and travel endlessly just to get to their jobs. Because there's not affordable housing.
The state estimates LA must add nearly 500,000 housing units by 2029, 5 times more than the city produced last decade. The study coincides with Mayor Karen Bass's executive directive that fast-tracks approvals for affordable housing projects.
We finally have a mayor that's singularly focused on this issue of solving homelessness and affordability.
The landmark study compiled data on every multifamily housing project the city approved over the last 13 years and analyzed each step of the approval and construction phases to identify bottlenecks.
We had a data set of about 3,000 projects, and what we found is that of those that were permitted between 2010 and 2022, only about 60% of them had been completed at the time of our study.
The typical length of a development on a multifamily housing project from beginning to end was roughly 4 years. And of those 4 years, a full 1.5 years could be attributed to the approval process.
Projects that had to go before the City Planning Commission, on average, that would add about half a year to the approval process. On the other hand, projects that met all the existing zoning requirements and didn't need entitlements took about 6 months faster to be approved.
If you take the mayor's executive directive, that directive constrained approval times to 2 months. We said, well, what if that directive had been in place for the past 12 years.
We also looked at what would happen if more of the projects were able to be approved by right. And we found that that also had a significant increase in housing production.
The researchers endorsed policies to expedite approvals of affordable housing and recommended extending some of those to market rate housing as well. They also proposed creating a system to improve coordination between city departments and developers.
This is not a costly recommendation. This is just a recommendation that the city come up to speed with methodologies that are used throughout industry with respect to tracking of production.
It solidifies and outlines from a researcher point of view the struggles that our developers have been talking about for years.
If the city can provide certainty around the development process, we will be successful. When we have done that with TOCs, transit-oriented developments, we have seen high rates of production. We have a much greater demand than our ability to supply it, and we must change the way we do business.
This administration has the ability, and I believe the commitment, to expedite every process that everyone has been complaining about, to build affordable housing, to build moderate income housing.
This report is simply an effort to look at the data, to get the processes to run better, to get the trains to run on time with efficiency in such a way that LA can be a better place for all its residents.
Mary, it looks like I'm up.
You are up. I was just going to say, and
Okay.
now we have our
Okay.
council president, Paul Krikorian.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you, first of all, Mary, and thank you, LABC. I can't begin to tell you how important this study is, and it's consistent really with so much of the work that LABC has done in partnership with this city council to develop policy that is really based on data and academic analysis and producing real best practices. We did it in partnership with LABC when it comes to Los Angeles's dramatic reforms to our procurement processes. We did it with LABC when it came to encouraging more investment in renewable energy, and particularly solar energy. And in many other policy areas, this council has partnered closely with LABC in finding real solutions. And this issue of the housing gap and housing unaffordability in Los Angeles should be no different. Because I've certainly heard throughout my time in City Hall a consistent drumbeat from the business and development community about the difficulties of getting things done in Los Angeles. And it's usually something along the lines of, well, you know, Los Angeles isn't friendly to builders, and if this were fill in the blank city, we wouldn't be facing these challenges. The harder part is getting to the specifics of what that really means, what it means in terms of the actual fixable problem and what it means in its consequences. And the study that we have before us today tells us precisely that. It tells us these are the most important sticking points that can be fixed that will considerably accelerate the development process. And by doing that, produce a certain number of additional housing units and additional affordable housing units. That information has never been before us before in a real operational sense. And so I really can't express strongly enough my appreciation to LABC for this and for all of your partnership in these sorts of areas. Now, in this area, there is good news. There's always good news in Los Angeles, and there's always bad news that goes with it. So, or maybe that's just me, I don't know. But the good news is Los Angeles has stepped up its production of housing. And over the last 5 years, although we have a minority of the population in the county, the city of Los Angeles has produced 70% of the permitted housing in the county, over 100,000 units in the last 5 years. Just in the last year, it was around 25,000, almost 25,000 units, which was a 40-year high. And we've significantly increased the number of deed restricted affordable units as well. And as I'm sure you all know, just last week or the week before, I've lost track, we were able to finally, after years of effort, decades really of effort and waiting, we were able finally to pass through the council a milestone by enacting the community plans for downtown and Hollywood, which will enable 135,000 new units of housing in those areas. With that being said, we have so much more to do. And this study, I think, demonstrates that there are practical, tangible things that can be done in order to expedite the approval process and the construction process. And we're already working on some of those areas. Site plan review is an area that has long been a concern and is specifically referenced in this report and analyzed. And I'm pleased that we already have a number of efforts in process to reduce the percentage of projects that are subject to site plan review by eliminating 100% affordable projects from site plan review. And then pursuant to a motion that I introduced, we already have a draft ordinance before CPC right now to eliminate affordable units from the calculation. So if you have a mixed project of 49 market rate units and an unlimited number of affordable units, that project would also be exempt from site plan review. So this is a way to incentivize and encourage more investment in general, but specifically more investment that produces more affordable units. We have much to do in continuing, as we always have, in coordinating our development departments to work more closely together. Part of that is a management issue. Part of it is a technology issue. Part of it is just an information sharing issue, as this report has demonstrated. And I think there's much that we can do, starting with investing in modern technology for our development departments and helping them to talk to one another more easily and to coordinate the information that they have and to make it easier for the customer as well. In addition to the technological investments that we have to do, though, we also have to make human investments. And as chair of the budget committee over the last 10 years, before I became council president, I focused on this idea of creating and funding adequate positions to be able to fill the service departments so that the functions of the city in serving customers can move forward. And that's certainly been true in planning. It's been true in building and safety. It's been true in all of the departments that touch development. But even with those funded positions, we still face a 20% vacancy rate across the city. And we're not the only employer, of course, to face that challenge, but this is something that we need to address as a council in order to have talented people who are able to serve our customers and expedite these processes that we're talking about today. So those are a few of the things that we have to be focusing on right away. But you, thankfully, have given us a list. And in this report, there are a number of specific policy recommendations, which I'm just delighted to see and to have read. And I want you to know that you have my assurance that every one of those policy recommendations that are in this report will be advanced in this council, will be analyzed, will be moved forward into the legislative process. And I'm looking forward to working closely with you in pursuing each and every one of those recommendations. And in doing that, I know that we will have a very, very strong partner in my colleague representing Council District 4, Councilmember Nithya Raman, who has been in her first term in office, has already been a thoughtful thought leader in the area of housing, has focused on innovative solutions to address the affordability gap and to uplift people, especially who are in such need in our city. And there's a reason that I made the decision to consolidate the Housing Committee and the Homelessness Committee because they are inextricably linked. And there was only one person that I thought could do the job of chairing that combined committee, and that is one of our housing leaders in the city of Los Angeles, Councilmember Nithya Raman. Councilmember Raman.
Thank you so much, Council President, for those kind words. And I sincerely appreciate your leadership and thoughtfulness on this issue in particular, but across the board as well. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you also to Mary Leslie and everybody at the LA Business Council for putting this event together and for inviting me to speak. After everything that the Council President stated, I think that there is, I don't want to be repetitive, but I want to share with all of you why I found this study so exciting. One important factor that we face here in the city of Los Angeles is that we have a lot of challenges with our bureaucratic process for approving housing. And this study documents exactly what housing providers are sharing with us on an anecdotal and one-on-one basis as they're working on projects in our district. It quantifies the impacts that the challenges that they're facing are having on their projects and how much they're able to build. And it allows us as policymakers to be able to understand exactly why ensuring that we take on these challenges head on will be essential for meeting this moment and for addressing our housing crisis. The study says that the uncertainty that housing providers and developers are facing as they're entering the city of Los Angeles and working here has hindered our ability to increase our housing stock. The study finds that entitlements and approvals, and particularly the process of interacting with DWP, and that was really a big learning for me, add significant time to construction. And I think it points us in a very, very straightforward direction. If we can ensure that our departments are able to make sure that they are responding to applications in a timely fashion, that they are coordinating with one another far more effectively, and that we're including the Department of Water and Power in our discussions much more effectively and much more head-on, that we can make significant progress on what the city of Los Angeles has in its control, because we don't control market rate values. We don't control the price of land. We can't control how the private sector invests in our city, but we can make it much easier. We can make sure that the rules of the game are clear for developers who want to operate here. We can create very clear incentives for exactly the kind of housing we need more desperately, which is affordable housing. And we can ensure through the rules and policies that we set into place and the mandates that we create for departments and the accountability that we have for departments that we're able to make significant progress towards those goals. So I want to just thank the LABC for putting this study together, for quantifying exactly the impacts of these processes on the number of units that we have been able to produce and that we will be able to produce, and for laying out a clear set of policies ahead of us that we can take on as a council and implement in the city. We have already, through our office, put together 2 policy interventions that I think have echo some of this. We have put forward an affordable housing overlay zone, which incentivizes the creation of more affordable housing in high resource neighborhoods. We've also put forward efforts to streamline 100% affordable housing, something that ED1 really targets. And I think the lessons that we learn from those are lessons that we can take to much more of our policymaking as well. I'm really grateful for the partnership of the LABC in all of this work. I think what is clear in this report is that the city has a lot of power to take action on building housing in ways that will have clear and measurable impacts on the quantity of housing that is produced here in the city of Los Angeles, and that it is on us to make sure that we're taking those steps forward. I'm grateful for this report. I'm grateful for the policy guidelines it sets out, and I want to just assure all of you that these are going to be my priorities as the chair of the Housing and Homelessness Committee in moving forward over these next few months and ensuring that Mayor Bass's efforts in putting this issue, housing and homelessness, squarely at the center of her administration are supported by a similar focus and similar efforts from the council in ensuring that her policymaking and our policymaking are aligned in support of one another and ensuring that we're taking on the city's biggest challenges. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here, for doing this report, and for ensuring that we will be taking steps forward to take on this crisis head on.
Thank you, Councilman Rahman. And I think we are blessed to have both you and Council President Paul Kerkorian with Mayor Bass. I think we have the A team right now, one of the strongest teams I've seen in 2 decades that are taking on these issues. And I think that's the profoundly good news, because the political will matters. And we strongly endorse your priorities in focusing on 100% low income housing, and we appreciate your commitment to also looking at how to speed up moderate mixed income housing, which we think is the next large group of projects that have to be prioritized. So with that, this is a perfect bridge to William Lamborn, the Director of Planning, Policy, and Development in the Office of Mayor Karen Bass. William.
Hi, good morning, and thank you so much, Mary. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you this morning. We're just also so excited to see this research, to be here in conversation with the LABC council members and fellow participants this morning, and really considering and looking analytically at ways to streamline housing production. There are several efforts that are underway stemming from the mayor's office and the broader city family relative to housing, affordability, and streamline that really interrelate and dovetail with the topic of the report we're looking at today. Of course, Executive Directive 1 was issued by the mayor in December, establishing priority expediting and streamlining for 100% affordable and interim housing projects at a time of just such critical and acute need in the housing emergency. And the mayor's office and city departments have been working diligently and collaboratively in its implementation. In addition to ED1, as the council president also alluded to, there's several significant streamlining measures underway as well that are making progress, such as the site plan review ordinance that was recently before the City Planning Commission, which would not count affordable units towards the threshold that would trigger a discretionary project review. There's the implementation programs of the city's housing element, which is so critical, as it's been mentioned. Ministerial project reviews being advanced through community plan updates and incentive programs. So along all of these lines, there's just multiple ways in which we're continuing to seek further and additional effective streamlining approaches for affordable housing and housing in general, really in keeping with the focus and recommendations of the report this morning. So just want to say thank you also to the LABC for producing this report, for convening all of us here this morning to discuss this. We're just so excited about the research and analysis into this critical and far-reaching topic, and are very excited to delve into the report's research and recommendations as they relate to streamlining and affordable housing production, which is just such a critical focus of the administration. So again, I just appreciate the opportunity to share here in this group this morning. Looking forward to next steps, looking forward to hearing from others on the call today and for this conversation more broadly. So thank you again to the LABC and to all participants this morning, and looking forward to what comes next. Thank you.
Thank you, William. And I think one of the key findings people will see when they see the study is that of the 120,000 units that are in process since 2010, right? We have managed to produce 70,000 of those units. And that's, as Dr. Kang said, that's about 60%. So pulling forward a lot of those projects that are mixed income, I think is really something we have to seriously look at. And with that, Jen, I think this is a perfect introduction to you. Jen helped head up our working group, which was the group of nonprofit, for-profit developers and other housing experts who worked with our researchers, Dr. Gabriel and Dr. Kang, on the findings. You participated in the survey. You are an experienced developer here in Los Angeles. You've done a lot of preservation work. You've done a lot of rethinking how a for-profit market rate developer can contribute to the affordable housing stock. So with that, Jen, please talk to us a little bit about why this study is important and what you think is important.
Sure. Well, again, thank you for having me here. Thank you to the LABC and Drs. Kang and Gabriel for putting this report together. I'm honored to be a participant, and as someone who's been developing in the city of Los Angeles for nearly 20 years, I'm just very grateful that there is data to really articulate, I think, what we've all known intuitively, but really help put some quantification behind policy recommendations to speed up the process of development, particularly multifamily development in the city. And I cannot echo enough some of the commentary around needing to have predictability around the process. I work with so many investors who have just effectively exited the market entirely for development in the city of LA because the process is opaque. It's very difficult to predict how long it's going to take. And I think one of the key takeaways that people should know about is anytime the project has more perceived risk or uncertainty around the duration of the project, the cost of capital becomes higher. And that just makes the project more expensive, which makes it more difficult to make it affordable. And so I'm just very excited about the streamlining potential behind the policy recommendations on this report. I'd add, I've been working on a 100% affordable housing project that has taken 5 years to come to fruition. It's one of the largest affordable projects in the city of LA. We haven't even put a shovel in the ground. Now, I can say that some of the new policy measures that have been put into place would completely change that duration were I to start that project today. So we have made a lot of progress, but I do think there's more to be done. And I would echo what Councilmember Rahman said earlier in this discussion, that policy can make a huge difference in just the overall production. As she said, we can't control the market, we can't control where interest rates are going, but policy really can help streamline, attract more capital into the market, attract just speed of execution, and help us solve our big housing crisis. So thank you again for having me here today. I'm very excited to see hopefully some implementation of these recommendations and see how this all comes together. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you for your leadership and your continued commitment. And I'd like to say, and I'm sorry I was remiss for not saying it earlier, all of you that are participating, thank you for being on this Zoom this morning. We will have time for questions and answer. If you submit your questions into the chat box, we will be able to ask them of our panelists. Also, Dr. Kang from CSUN is with us today, who can answer questions about the study. Now it's my honor to introduce Josh Raper, the regional manager of the Southwest Mountain States Regional Council of Carpenters. I have to get that all out, Josh. It's been a pleasure. We worked with you for many years on many projects, particularly on state legislation. The Carpenters Union is providing leadership. I think the Carpenters Union is trying to get us a big path in the middle here. to increase production. So with that, Josh, maybe you can talk about what you think is important and why.
Thank you, Mary, and good morning, all. We're excited to see progress and investment towards solving this important issue. The Carpenters Union and our 40,000 local members support this study 100%. And as construction professionals, we understand the importance of having a strategic plan, or in construction terms, a blueprint in place to achieving these goals. In order to create the proper housing needs, we must unclog the funnel by modernizing this process with a true fit-for-purpose system in which, in return, we will create predictability while building communities of wealth. True data is vital to this process. As the Carpenters, our practice is to measure twice and to cut once, eliminating errors. With proper analytics and data, we will ultimately gain productivity. The Carpenters have a large local workforce poised to efficiently construct the units and are ready and willing to embrace local residents into our apprenticeship programs. Giving opportunity for locals to build and improve their neighborhoods creates pride in communities and will have long-lasting positive effects. So we're excited to be partners in this process and look forward to a collaborative effort and some quality Q&A. And the Southwest Mountain States Regional Council of Carpenters can assist in any way possible. We will. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. And I have to say that's one of the nicest endorsements ever, Josh, and we look forward to working with you. And we thank Councilman Krikorian and Councilmember Rahman for their commitment to take these key recommendations into council for review and discussion, and that we get a day in court on all of them. I'd like to begin the Q&A with Council President Krikorian. Rachel, may I have President Krikorian back? Maybe we could have all the panelists back. Councilman, President Krikorian, how do the efforts to reduce discretionary reviews align with your priorities on the Committee for Governance Reform, and particularly your commitment to ethics reform in the city of LA?
Well, thank you for making that connection, Mary. And I actually had meant to mention that it's really important. We've been rocked in this city over the last few years by scandals and documentable corruption that has led to federal indictments around land use and around development decisions. And the more engagement that political elected officials and political appointees have over very expensive, very valuable projects, and the more we have powers of Caesar in deciding whether or not something moves forward or even gets a fair hearing, the more possibility there is that someone with ill will and poor character and an unacceptable willingness to use their power improperly will do that. And so we can do all the ethics reforms that we want, but a person of bad will ignore those ethics reforms if they have the power to make a decision that for which they can be, bought off. And so we hope that there will be very few such people in government. But history shows us that we can never avoid that entirely. The best way to avoid it entirely is by removing, to the greatest extent we can, political processes from the professional decision-making that should be made around advancing development projects. Now, that's controversial because it's also true that elected officials know their districts very well, and they know the multiplicity of issues that go into any decision around changing a neighborhood, increasing the density in a neighborhood, what the infrastructure is, what all of those things, council members know extremely well. And we are very good at bringing people into the discussion who are impacted by that discussion. So there is a downside. The potential downside of doing this is having less of an opportunity to do that. So as we move forward in ensuring that these professional decisions are made by professionals based on equity and based on a clear vision for the future of the city and each community, and updated community plans and an updated general plan. When that all happens, they need to do that in a way that continues to take into account all of the interests of all stakeholders in what the future of Los Angeles looks like, not just saying yes to everything. But if we have the right people doing that work, that's not what they do. They do take into account stakeholder input. They do take into account environmental impacts. They take all of those issues into account in a way that is actually usually more fairly and equitably applied than it is when there's political involvement.
Thank you. And Council Member Rahman, you had your hand up. Would you like to also answer that?
I just wanted to add that I think, one of the biggest challenges to housing production, as this report finds, is unpredictability. And one of the reasons we're in such an unpredictable environment is because across the city, our community plans are decades out of date. We did just pass the Hollywood Community Plan update and the Downtown Community Plan update, which is great. Those are areas which are going to generate a lot of new housing units for the city, but we need to be doing that across the entire city. And I think it's really important for us to be focusing on that and to make sure that we're using the housing element process to circumvent the time it's going to take for those community plan updates to happen, because some of the work can be done through the housing element and that has a deadline. It has to be done in order for us to be able to meet the state's regulations. And so I think we have a real opportunity here to remove some of the discretion. But the thing is that it's not really a removal of discretion, because the council is still going to come together and talk about the rules that are in place to put together these plans and to put together the housing element. So what we're putting together is actually a system where our values about what Los Angeles should look like are enshrined in a clear set of rules that then make it a very clear landscape for developers to operate in. But we've already agreed on those rules. And so there should be no issues with any of the projects that are coming forward. That's the future that we can get to. And I think we can get to it very quickly.
Well, thank you, Council Member, for clarifying, because I think for those who don't know, the community plans, there's 35 of them, I believe, that need to be done, and 35 have to be done in order to update the general plan. So at a pace of a couple a year, right? We're on the clock, in 8 years to get 450,000 plus new units, right? So it means you're right. You have to be flexible, and the housing element is the other place you can be flexible. And Council President, your commitment to running an ethical, transparent, more customer friendly council and city, I think we applaud, and we really think that technology could be our friend, and we're hoping that our experience with RAMP translates into this experience, and that we are able to not only track our own projects internally, but share that with the developers who are affected, so they can see where they are in the process, right? And to that end, now I'd like to go to Dr. Kung, our researcher, Ed, and ask him the question, that we're being asked. Does the study provide support for expanding streamlining policies beyond just 100% affordable income to mixed income projects? Dr. Kung, can you address that?
Yeah, hi, Mary, and hi, everyone. One of our recommendations is to expand, to the extent possible, any streamlining measures to mixed income, middle income housing. And the primary reason for that is the great majority of housing units in the development pipeline are indeed for mixed income and market rate projects. And so if we think about the housing crisis simply as a matter of raw numbers and a supply issue and how many people are moving into the city who need housing and how many housing units we have available, we believe that greater impact can be achieved by addressing this very large segment of the market. And of course, that's not to minimize the drastic importance for affordable housing as well, but simply by the raw numbers, because we see that the majority of the units are still indeed from mixed income and market rate projects. That is why we also recommend extending streamlining measures to those types of projects as well.
Thank you, Ed. And I think, William, to bring you into the conversation, will there be a cross-departmental team established at the city to move recommendations to actionable items?
That's certainly something that we can consider. I think that could be very effective. And I also want to harken back to what Council Member Rahman was stating, which I think really spoke to me as well, which I think it just makes so much sense to establish a clear framework and rules at the beginning and do that thoughtfully to sort of avoid the situations that the council president was speaking to as well when those rules aren't in place. So just wanted also to harken back to that and just really appreciate that thought and that sort of line of thinking as well.
And William, I think a very strong message that came through in the survey is what both Council President and Councilmember Rahman were saying about making sure the rules are clear. Also making sure who's deciding is clear, right? That you're not bounced around, that each department isn't sort of their own kings and queens, right? That ultimately there is someone that sees the bigger picture, so to that end, do you think that we can sort of sharpen the accountability on decision making?
Yeah, I think so. And that relates sort of to that, broader framework of where initial decision makers, which decision-making bodies those are in charge through the processes that are established, and then sort of what that sets us up for, and making that very clear and making that, I think, effective is absolutely of critical importance to establish clear rules, to as was alluded to in the video earlier too, different decision-making processes also have different timeframes depending upon where certain projects go for decision makers. So that absolutely, I think, is something of critical importance in the overall conversation about streamlining and discretionary ministerial and where decision-making processes go. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, good. And Josh, do you think we have the manpower or the woman power to do this work? Do we have the right workforce? And Jen, do you feel like the development world is ready to go? That even with the macroeconomics that we're in and the high interest rates and all, that this would be an incentive to do business. So those are my two questions. Do we have the workforce, and will people come and invest and build?
Yes, I can speak on the workforce. We can, there's never been a dispatch that we haven't filled. We have community outreach events, and we held one in downtown Los Angeles last year. And we gave the ability, anyone that was willing and able to come out that day and apply to become a carpenter. 1,700 individuals showed up at 5 a.m. ready and willing to work. There's never been a project where the green fences has been put up and the trailer was brought on site and there was a superintendent standing there and the people never came. If there's good jobs, people will work, and we will give them the opportunity to do that. And as far as the carpenter's apprenticeship, we will train them with the proper skills and give them the certifications that they need to build these quality projects.
Yeah, I think this is super important that we're ready to go, that we send a signal that we have the workforce to do it. And Jen, do you think that the investment community, you're the president of Ethos now, you founded your own company, you worked a lot with financial institutions, you put deals together. What do you think is, what's the environment we're in, and what environment could we be in?
Well, I'd say, LA continues to be a market that's extremely attractive long-term for investors. Most of our investors are pension funds, institutional investors, endowments. they all see this as a growth market, diversified economy, great, diversified, educated population, and clearly there is demand for housing. And so the hesitation right now, and why a lot of investors are actually on hold around investing in Los Angeles, is really around the lack of clarity and predictability. And so I think removing this barrier and creating more transparency into the process, and I think as Councilmember Rahman said, who are the decision makers and how many layers of decisions are there? I think the big fear that people have is you think there's a pathway and then there's another gatekeeper or there's another process that opens it up for public debate, and you just don't know when you will have a final decision. And so that transparency, that predictability is everything. And I think this is a market people want to be in, and there is demand for the product. It's just a fear around the process. And that's why this policy recommendation is so important.
Council President.
Thanks, Barry. I'm so glad that Josh said what he said, and I just wanted to add one thought to that. And that is, as we talk about the unaffordability of the housing market in Southern California, too often we're only talking about, the side of it that relates to the cost of the units. And so our policy responses are often focused on that. How can we create more deed restrictions? How can we do, and all that is important. But the other side of that coin economically is in rebuilding our middle class so that more people can afford to meet the rent obligations or to buy their own home. And by streamlining this process, by expediting approvals, by allowing people like Jen and foreign direct investment and others to come into this market and pour money into our economy here, it will create hundreds of thousands of good jobs. It'll be the basis for uplifting our economy. It'll be the basis for recovering from COVID. And this will have a tremendous effect on not only producing more units so that on the supply side we bring down the cost of housing, but also in creating more people who can actually afford to live here because they have decent jobs. And that is just absolutely a critical part of this, and has to be a part of our calculus as well.
That's right. It's all these things are interrelated. There's no question. And Councilmember Rahman, I want to go back to the work that's been done, that you've done in your committee already with the overlay maps, because I think this is super critical. People need to see and agree that this is where low income housing is going. This is where affordable housing is going. This is where moderate housing is going, because I think that's part of something that has challenged us for a long time is getting that agreement about, we all agree we have this need. But then we need to agree where the need is going to be met, where the tire is going to hit the road, right? So I think that work that you're doing is so valuable, to continue to build out and show people, hey, this is how it's going to happen. This is how we can map it out. This is how you don't lose your, the feeling of a single family home in a residential neighborhood, okay? And this is where we can get greater density. And this is where we can enrich, different communities in LA to be more vibrant. So can you just talk a little bit about where you're going with that?
I think the work actually happens for this issue, probably not in the committee, but in the community. And it's really about, to me, talking to neighbors about what they love about their neighborhood and how we preserve what they love about it while making sure we have the housing we need. And for me, a huge opportunity to do this is along our major boulevards and corridors. I think, I moved to LA as an adult. And so I was always puzzled by the fact that our boulevards tend to have a lot of strip malls and 1- and 2-story construction. Like, it absolutely baffled me until I realized we had a law in place in LA to prevent construction along boulevards. And I think that, some of that has already been undone, but we have work to do to show people that adding density doesn't mean skyscrapers in their backyards. It can mean gentle density along the boulevards that can add vibrancy and foot traffic to their neighborhoods, that can allow their children and your grandchildren to live in your neighborhood, that can ensure that some of our best schools are losing enrollment because people can't afford to live in those neighborhoods anymore. And I think we can undo all of those things and really build up a neighborhood that really works for people. And I think more and more people are seeing that the costs of not building that housing have been so high for us. And when you can articulate those costs to people, that's how you can really make progress on this issue. And that's how you can, I think, really assure people that your neighborhoods will change, but they're already changing, you know? And so let's change it together in ways that work for all of us.
So this first order of business of getting the permanent affordable housing we need for homeless individuals, which I think is the mayor's first priority, and we agree with it. You think it's not mutually exclusive. We can do that, and we can lay out a plan on how we're going to build out our moderate and mixed income as well. I think he's telling us we have to do.
Oh, yes. I mean, I don't think we need to belabor the point here, but I think we can and must do it all. And it's different sources of funding. For homeless housing, it'll be from the city, it'll be from federal sources, it'll be from state sources. And for the other things, it's regulatory change that's going to enable the private market to do more. And we can capture more of the benefits if we design the regulations right. So it's not us doing everything. It's us doing the stuff that only we can do, and then allowing others to do what they need to do in a way that makes sense, is straightforward, is not unpredictable.
So you're going to help Jen be successful with her.
Yes, I hope. I mean, I heard your story and I started getting anxious just listening to it.
Well,
my God.
Josh is, all these carpenters, all these workers that are ready to go, boy, we need to get them going. Dr. Kang, will you summarize for us, because for those people who might never read the report, what you thought the most salient, because this is a good way to end, the most salient factors were that you learned, and what the key recommendations were that went with those? Just to summarize for us today.
Yeah, as part of the report, we measured the contribution of various factors to total development time from start to finish. And two factors really stood out. The first is the discretionary review process, whether a project had to go before the City Planning Commission, had to get site plan review, versus projects that didn't have to go through the entitlement process. And so we've really found that the projects that didn't have to go through discretionary review were really able to be completed a lot faster. And the second is actually underground electrical infrastructure work. Now, obviously, that makes sense because that's a very time-consuming task. But we did find, and in our interviews with developers and city officials, it was a very commonly mentioned bottleneck. And so whatever we can do there to streamline that process, to provide resources to expedite and make predictable the installation of the power connections, that could also be a significant step in improving project timelines.
So Councilmember Rahman's response that DWP needs to be integrated more in the planning and viewed as critical infrastructure, like an entitlement. It's you can't find out at the end. You got a year problem or 2 year problem. You got to build that up front, right? I think that was particularly helpful, Dr. Kang, integrating that DWP data, because that data, I've never seen it in a housing report before. So thank you for that. And thank you for all your hard work, because Dr. Kang dealt with the huge data sets, and it wasn't easy. He had to create the models and he had to create the regression analysis and help us create a narrative of what the data said. And that's a difficult thing to do, and only very good economists can do it. So thank you very much for all that hard work, Dr. Kang. And thank you all for participating today. I think this has been a successful launch of the new study. And for everybody who would like to read the study, please go to the LABC website. The study is there. And we look forward to Council President Krikorian and Councilmember Rahman seeing you in council and talking more about the study and the findings, and working with you on a broad-based coalition to support your motions and initiatives to get the necessary reform we need. So
thank you, Mary. Onward.